November 2011, Oakland, California. Shanice Thompson stood in the apartment manager's office, her two children waiting nervously in the hallway. Brennan sat behind his desk, looking at her with the kind of irritation landlords reserve for tenants who dare to complain. "Ms. Thompson, I've received your fourth maintenance request this month. I need to be frank with you, this is becoming a pattern." Shanice kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Mr. Brennan, there's black mold in my daughter's bedroom. The heater hasn't worked in 3 weeks. And yesterday, sparks came out of the outlet in the kitchen. These aren't minor complaints, they're safety issues." Marcus leaned back in his chair, the picture of a man who'd heard it all before. "I understand you're concerned. But frankly, I'm starting to think you're a problem tenant. We've had this building for 15 years without issues until you moved in. I've been here 18 months. The mold was here when I arrived. I have photos from move-in day that I submitted with my first request. The heater broke last month. The electrical issues started this week." Shanice pulled out a folder she'd been keeping. Photos, maintenance requests, copies of everything she'd submitted. "I've documented everything. These are serious code violations." Marcus's expression hardened. "Are you threatening me with code enforcement?" "I'm asking you to fix dangerous conditions in the apartment I'm paying rent for. My daughter Zoe has asthma. The mold is making her sick. My son Jamal almost got shocked by that outlet. I need these things fixed." "What you need," Marcus said slowly, "is to understand how things work. Maintenance costs money. Your rent is below market rate. You're in a rent-controlled unit paying $1,200 for a 2-bedroom. If I wanted, I could renovate and charge $2,500. But I've been generous, keeping your rent low. And this is how you thank me? Constant complaints?" Shanice felt her face flush. "I'm not complaining. I'm asking for basic safety. You're being difficult. You know what happens to difficult tenants? They find themselves without housing." Marcus pulled out a form. "I'm giving you a 30-day notice to vacate. Tenant-landlord relations have broken down. You're no longer a good fit for this property." The words hit like a physical blow. "You're evicting me? For reporting safety violations? I'm choosing not to renew your lease. That's my right as a property owner. You have 30 days. Marcus slid the notice across the desk. Shanice's hands shook as she picked it up. 30 days. She was a single mother working full-time as a home health aide, barely making ends meet. She had $800 in savings, finding a new apartment in Oakland, paying first month's rent, last month's rent, and deposit. That was at least $5,000. Money she didn't have. "You can't do this. I have children. We have nowhere to go." "That's not my problem. You should have thought about that before becoming a problem tenant." Marcus stood, indicating the meeting was over. 30 days, Ms. Thompson. I suggest you start packing." Shanice walked out of that office in a daze. Her children were waiting in the hallway. Zoe, 8 years old, clutching her inhaler. Jamal, 6, holding his sister's hand. "Mama, what did he say?" Zoe asked. Shanice knelt down, trying to keep her voice calm. "We're going to have to move, babies." "But it's going to be okay." It wasn't going to be okay. Shanice knew that, but she couldn't let her children see her panic. The next 30 days were a nightmare. Shanice searched frantically for apartments. Every landlord wanted references from her current landlord. Marcus gave her terrible references, calling her difficult and constantly complaining. Applications were rejected one after another. She applied for Section 8 housing. The waiting list was 2 years. She asked family for help. Her mother was living in a tiny 1-bedroom herself. Her brother was in Atlanta, barely scraping by. She looked at shelters. The family shelters had waiting lists. The only immediate option was a temporary emergency shelter that could house them for 90 days while she figured something out. On day 30, Shanice packed everything they owned into her old Honda Civic. Clothes, toys, Zoe's asthma medication, Jamal's favorite stuffed bear. Everything that defined their life fit into one car. Marcus was in the parking lot, watching, making sure she actually left. "Out by midnight," he called. "After that, anything left becomes property of the building." Shanice ignored him, loading the last box. Zoe was crying silently. Jamal was too young to fully understand, but knew something terrible was happening. They drove to the emergency shelter, a converted warehouse with cots separated by curtains. It smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation, families crowded together, children crying, parents looking shell-shocked. This was their home now. Shanice lay on the cot that night, her children pressed against her, and made a promise, not out loud, just in her heart, in the quiet rage that was burning beneath her exhaustion. I'm going to own property. I'm going to understand how this system works. And someday, somehow, Marcus Brennan is going to know what it feels like to be powerless. The shelter was supposed to be temporary. It turned into 6 months. Shanice kept her job somehow. The home health agency was understanding about her housing situation, but she knew she was on thin ice. She had to appear stable, reliable, professional, even while living in a shelter. She worked during the day. At night, while her children slept, she researched real estate, property law, landlord-tenant relationships, how evictions worked, how property investments worked, how people with nothing built something. A caseworker at the shelter, Maria, noticed. "You're always reading about real estate. Why?" "Because I'm never going to be at someone else's mercy again," Shanice said simply. Maria studied her. "You know, there's a construction training program. 6 months, free, includes job placement. They're looking for women and minorities. The pay is good. $25 an hour to start, $40 plus after a few years with the right certifications." Shanice had been making $15 an hour as a home health aide. Construction? "My cousin went through it. She's a foreman now, makes $75,000. She says the program changed her life." Maria wrote down the information. "Maybe it could change yours." Shanice applied that week, got accepted, started the program while still working part-time and living in the shelter. It was brutal. Physical labor during the day, parenting at night, studying whenever she could. But Shanice had discovered something about herself in that shelter. She was capable of surviving anything if it meant her children would never be homeless again. 6 months later, she completed the program. Got placed with a construction company doing commercial renovations. The pay was $25 an hour, almost double what she'd made before. She saved every penny. Moved her family into a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it was theirs, with a landlord who actually fixed things when they broke. And she kept studying real estate. At night, after Zoe and Jamal were asleep, Shanice took online courses. Real estate licensing, property management, investment strategies. She learned about foreclosures, REOs, tax liens. She learned how people with modest incomes could acquire property through creative financing. By 2013, Shanice had her real estate license. She started working weekends showing properties, earning commission. Every dollar went into savings. By 2015, she had $15,000 saved. Enough for a down payment on her first rental property, a rundown duplex in a neighborhood investors were ignoring. She renovated it herself, using skills from construction, rented both units. The rental income covered the mortgage plus $400 a month profit. Shanice bought another property in 2016, then another in 2017. She was methodical, conservative. She never over-leveraged. She fixed properties properly. No cutting corners, no ignoring maintenance requests like Marcus had done to her. By 2019, she owned 6 rental properties. Her construction job had promoted her to site supervisor at $60,000 a year. Her real estate portfolio generated $3,000 a month in net income. She was no longer surviving. She was building wealth. Her children were thriving. Zoe was 15 now, on the honor roll, her asthma managed with proper medical care and a mold-free home. Jamal was 13, playing basketball, doing well in school. They lived in a nice 3-bedroom house Shanice had bought in 2018. Nothing fancy, but it was theirs, owned, not rented. And Shanice kept her eye on one particular property. The apartment building where Marcus Brennan had evicted her in 2011. She drove by it sometimes, watching. It was deteriorating. Marcus wasn't maintaining it, same pattern he'd always had. Paint peeling, roof sagging, the same neglect that had endangered her children. She checked public records regularly, waiting. In October 2021, the records showed Marcus had taken out a second mortgage on the building. Money troubles. In March 2022, he missed property tax payments. By August 2022, the building was in pre-foreclosure. Shanice tracked it like a hunter tracking prey. She knew the exact amount Marcus owed. She knew the property's condition. She knew what it was worth and what she'd pay. When the foreclosure auction was scheduled for November 2022, Shanice was ready. She had $180,000 in cash and credit. The building was assessed at $650,000 but needed $100,000 in repairs. No traditional investor would touch it at that price. But Shanice wasn't a traditional investor. She was a woman who'd been homeless because of this building, who'd sworn she'd never be powerless again, who'd spent 11 years preparing for this exact moment. At the auction, she bid $425,000. No one else bid higher. Too much work, too much risk. The gavel came down. Shanice Thompson was the new owner of the building where Marcus Brennan had evicted her for complaining. She pulled the ownership records. Marcus was still living there, Unit 4B, the manager's apartment, the same apartment he'd used when he called her a problem tenant. He was 3 months behind on rent to the previous mortgage holder. Under the terms of the foreclosure, Shanice now owned the building and all existing tenant obligations, including the right to evict non-paying tenants. Shanice sat in her car outside the building that night, looking up at the windows. 11 years. 11 years from being evicted to owning the building. Tomorrow, she'd start the renovation process. She'd bring this building up to code properly. She'd be the landlord she'd needed Marcus to be. But first, she had one piece of business to handle. Marcus Brennan had 30 days to vacate, just like he'd given her. And this time, there'd be no extensions. November 15th, 2022, Shanice stood outside the apartment building she now owned, holding a folder of documents. 11 years ago, she'd walked out of this building homeless with 2 small children. Now, she held the deed. The property needed work. Shanice had already hired inspectors. The roof needed replacement. The electrical system was outdated and dangerous. The plumbing was failing. Marcus had neglected everything for years, letting the building deteriorate while collecting rent. But that wasn't why she was here today. She walked to Unit 4B, the manager's apartment, and knocked. Marcus Brennan opened the door. He was 62 now, looking older than his years. He didn't recognize her immediately. "Can I help you?" "Mr. Brennan, I'm Shanice Thompson, the new owner of this building. I need to discuss your tenancy." Marcus frowned. "The building was sold?" "The bank didn't tell me. Foreclosure auction. I purchased it last week." Shanice handed him a document. "This is notice that you're 3 months behind on rent to the previous mortgage holder. Under California law, those arrears transfer to me as the new owner." Marcus scanned the notice, his face going pale. "I can explain. I've been having some financial difficulties. You owe $3,600 in back rent, plus I'm implementing immediate rent increases to market rate once I complete renovations. Your unit will go from $1,200 to $2,400 monthly. That's double. I can't afford. That's current market rate for a 2-bedroom in Oakland. I've been below market for years." Shanice kept her voice professional. "However, given your arrears and the rent increase, I'm offering you 2 options. Pay the $3,600 immediately plus first month at the new rate, or accept a 30-day notice to vacate." Marcus stared at her. Something about her face was familiar. "Thompson, do I know you?" "I lived here in 2011. Unit 2A, you evicted me for reporting safety violations." Recognition crashed over Marcus's face. The single mother, the one who'd complained about mold, the difficult tenant. "That was... you were..." Marcus struggled for words. "Look, that was a business decision, nothing personal. It was personal to me. I had 2 small children. We ended up in a homeless shelter for 6 months because you called me a problem tenant for asking you to fix dangerous conditions." Shanice's voice was steady. "But I'm not here for revenge. I'm here as a property owner conducting business, same as you did 11 years ago." Marcus's hands were shaking. "I don't have $3,600. I've had some setbacks, medical bills, the property taxes. Not my problem. You should have thought about that before neglecting property maintenance and missing tax payments." Shanice handed him another document. 30-day notice to vacate. You can move out voluntarily or I can file formal eviction proceedings. Your choice." "Where am I supposed to go?" "I'm 62 years old." "I don't know, figure it out. That's what you told me when I asked the same question with 2 children depending on me. Shanice turned to leave, then paused. Actually, I do know what happens to difficult tenants. You taught me. They find themselves without housing. She walked away, leaving Marcus holding the eviction notice. Over the next week, Shanice began renovations. She hired contractors to fix the roof, upgrade electrical, replace plumbing. She inspected every unit, documenting years of neglect. Other tenants approached her nervously. They'd heard Marcus was being evicted. They were scared of rent increases they couldn't afford. Shanice called a building meeting. 15 tenants gathered in the common area, mostly working-class families, several elderly residents, a few young professionals. I'm Shanice Thompson, your new landlord. I know change is scary. I want to be transparent about my plans. She pulled up a presentation. This building has been neglected for years. I'm investing $150,000 in repairs and upgrades. Every unit will be inspected. Anything dangerous or broken will be fixed immediately. No more ignored maintenance requests, relieved murmurs from the tenants. However, repairs cost money. I'll need to raise rents moderately over the next 2 years to cover costs and reach market rate. But I'm implementing a program. Any tenant who's been here over 5 years and has perfect rent payment history gets a 40% discount from market rate. You've been loyal tenants. I'll be a loyal landlord. An elderly woman raised her hand. What about Mr. Brennan? We heard he's being evicted. Mr. Brennan is 3 months behind on rent and refuses to pay. Under California law, I can evict for non-payment. That's what I'm doing. Shanice paused. But I want you all to know, I will never evict anyone for reporting maintenance issues. In fact, I'm setting up an online system where you can submit requests 24/7. I want to know about problems before they become dangerous. The tenants relaxed. They'd been living under Marcus's neglectful management for years. The new owner seemed competent and fair. One tenant, an older black man named Mr. Johnson, stayed after the meeting. Ms. Thompson, I remember you. Unit 2A, right? You had those 2 kids. Marcus evicted you. Yes, sir. I wanted to speak up back then. Tell people he was wrong, but I was scared he'd evict me too. Mr. Johnson looked ashamed. I'm sorry I didn't help you. You don't need to apologize. The system makes people scared. That's how landlords like Marcus operate, through fear. Shanice squeezed his shoulder. But I'm going to run this building differently. You'll see. Over the next 3 weeks, Marcus tried everything to stay. He showed up at Shanice's office begging for more time. He offered to work as the building manager for free. He even tried to scrape together partial payment. Shanice refused all of it. You had opportunities to work with me. You chose not to. 30 days means 30 days. On day 28, Marcus hired a lawyer who sent a threatening letter claiming wrongful eviction. Shanice's lawyer responded immediately. Client is 3 months in arrears. Notice was properly served. All procedures followed California law exactly. The case was dismissed. On day 30, Marcus still hadn't moved. Shanice filed formal eviction proceedings. The court date was set for December 20th. Marcus showed up with his lawyer, looking desperate. He'd prepared a sob story about being elderly, on fixed income, having nowhere to go. But Shanice had documentation, 3 months unpaid rent, years of neglecting property maintenance, a pattern of retaliatory evictions against tenants who complained. The judge reviewed everything. Mr. Brennan, you're 3 months behind on rent. The landlord is within her rights to evict for non-payment. I'm ordering you to vacate within 7 days. Your Honor, I have nowhere to go. That's not the court's concern. You had 30 days notice plus additional time during these proceedings. 7 days. The gavel came down. Marcus turned to Shanice in the courthouse hallway. His lawyer had left. He was alone. Please, I'll pay what I owe. Just give me more time. Shanice looked at the man who'd made her and her children homeless, who'd called her a problem tenant for wanting safety, who'd watched her load her car with everything they owned and showed no mercy. No. I'm begging you. You think begging works? I begged you 11 years ago. I told you I had nowhere to go with 2 children. You said that wasn't your problem. Shanice's voice was ice. Now it's my turn to say it. Your housing situation is not my problem. You have 7 days. Marcus moved out 6 days later. Shanice watched from across the street as he loaded boxes into a U-Haul, his movements slow and defeated. She felt no joy, no satisfaction, just the cold completion of a business transaction. That evening, she walked through the empty manager's apartment. It was in terrible condition. Stained carpets, broken fixtures, walls that hadn't been painted in years. Marcus had lived in the same neglect he'd imposed on his tenants. Shanice's phone rang. Her daughter Zoe, now 19 and in college. "Mom, I saw your text. You really evicted him?" "I did. How do you feel?" Shanice thought about it. "Like I closed a chapter. 11 years ago, that man made us homeless. Today, I own the building and he's the one without housing. But it doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't give us back those 6 months in the shelter." "But you won." "I survived. I built something." "That's different than winning." Shanice looked around the apartment. "Tomorrow I start renovating this unit. I'm going to turn it into proper affordable housing for a family that needs it. Someone like we were back then." "You're a better person than him, Mom." "I'm just a person who learned the system and used it correctly. Marcus abused power. I'm using it to create stable housing. That's the difference." After hanging up, Shanice locked up the apartment and walked to her car. Tomorrow she'd begin Phase 2, renovating the building properly, creating quality affordable housing, being the landlord she'd wished Marcus had been. But tonight, she allowed herself one moment of acknowledgement. The 12-year journey from homeless shelter to property owner was complete. Marcus Brennan had taught her that power matters. So she'd become powerful. And she'd use that power to ensure other families wouldn't suffer what hers had suffered. That was enough. January 2023. Shanice stood in the renovated lobby of what was now officially Thompson Apartments. 3 months of intensive work had transformed the building. New roof, updated electrical throughout, modern plumbing, fresh paint, secure entry system, a community room where tenants could gather. The building Marcus had let deteriorate was now a model of responsible property management. But Shanice's transformation went deeper than cosmetics. She'd created a tenant advocacy program, partnering with legal aid to offer free consultations. She'd implemented a maintenance request system that tracked response times and held her accountable. She'd hired a property manager, a young Latina woman named Carmen, who'd also once been homeless, and paid her well with benefits. Most importantly, she'd kept her promise about rent. Long-term tenants with good payment history got significant discounts. 3 families who'd lived there over a decade paid 40% below market rate. "You're losing money," her real estate mentor pointed out. "You could charge full market rate and double your profit." "I'm making enough profit. And I'm building community that's worth more than maximum rent." Shanice reviewed the numbers. Besides, stable tenants who pay on time are better than constantly turning over units chasing higher rents. The model was working. 0 vacancies, 0 evictions for non-payment. Shanice worked with struggling tenants to create payment plans rather than immediately evicting. The building had a waiting list of families wanting to move in. In February, Shanice received a call from a local news reporter. "Ms. Thompson, we're doing a story on innovative affordable housing models. Your building keeps coming up. Would you be willing to interview?" The story ran in March. From homeless shelter to property owner, how one woman is reimagining landlord-tenant relations. The article detailed Shanice's journey, being evicted by Marcus for reporting safety violations, the homeless shelter, construction training, building a real estate portfolio, buying the building that had evicted her, and transforming it into a model of ethical property management. It went viral locally, then regional, then national. Housing advocates started calling. Other property owners wanted to learn her model. Nonprofits asked her to speak about pathways out of homelessness. One call came from Oakland City Council. "Ms. Thompson, we're updating our rental housing ordinance. We'd like your input as someone who's experienced both sides, tenant and landlord." Shanice testified at City Council in April. "I've been the tenant reporting dangerous conditions and getting evicted for it. I've been homeless because a landlord chose profit over safety, and now I'm a landlord trying to do it right." She presented her building's model. "Ethical property management isn't charity, it's smart business. My building is 100% occupied with stable long-term tenants. I spend less on turnover, less on legal fees, less on finding new renters. I make less profit per unit than I could, but more profit overall because I don't have vacancies or expensive evictions. She pulled up data. Retaliatory evictions cost cities millions in social services, homeless shelters, emergency housing, displacement. What if we incentivized ethical landlords with tax breaks? What if we created stricter penalties for neglect? What if we made it profitable to be a good landlord? The council listened. By June, Oakland passed new ordinances, stronger penalties for retaliatory evictions, mandatory maintenance response times, tax incentives for landlords who maintained affordable units. Shanice's testimony had influenced policy. Meanwhile, word had gotten back to her about Marcus Brennan. He'd moved into a rundown apartment in a cheaper neighborhood, lost most of his assets in the foreclosure. At 63, he was working part-time at a hardware store, barely making rent. Shanice heard this from Mr. Johnson, the elderly tenant who'd apologized for not speaking up during her eviction. "I saw him at the bus stop last week," Mr. Johnson said. "He looked rough. Asked if I knew whether you'd consider renting to him again at a lower rate." "What did you tell him?" "I said you run a waiting list like everyone else. No special treatment." Mr. Johnson smiled. He didn't like that answer. Shanice had no intention of letting Marcus back into her building, but she also didn't feel the need to actively harm him further. He'd lost everything through his own poor decisions, over-leveraging properties, neglecting maintenance, alienating tenants. His downfall was self-inflicted. "He's learning what it's like to be powerless," Mr. Johnson observed. "That's justice enough." In August, Shanice bought her 8th property, another neglected building she'd renovate using the same model. She was building a portfolio of ethically managed affordable housing. Her children were thriving. Zoe was entering her sophomore year at UC Berkeley, majoring in urban planning. Jamal was 16, excelling in school, already talking about studying architecture. "I want to design affordable housing," he told his mother, "buildings that don't fall apart. Places where families can be safe." Shanice realized her children had learned from their experience too, not bitterness, but purpose. One September evening, Carmen called. "Shanice, there's a man here asking to speak with you. Says his name is Marcus Brennan." Shanice drove to the building. Marcus was waiting in the lobby, the same lobby where he'd once held power, now renovated and welcoming. He looked smaller somehow, worn down. "Miss Thompson, thank you for seeing me. You have 5 minutes." Marcus took a breath. "I wanted to apologize for what I did to you and your children, for evicting you when you were just asking for safe housing, for calling you a problem tenant when the problem was my neglect." Shanice studied him. The apology sounded genuine, but it came 11 years too late and only after he'd lost everything. "Why now, Marcus? You had opportunities to apologize before I bought this building, before I evicted you. Why wait until you've lost everything?" "Because I didn't understand until it happened to me. Being on the other side, facing eviction, scrambling for housing, feeling powerless, it made me see what I'd done to you and others." Marcus's voice cracked. "I was a terrible landlord. I prioritized profit over people. I ignored maintenance because I was cheap, and when tenants complained, I retaliated instead of fixing problems. Yes, you did all of that. I know an apology doesn't fix what I did, doesn't give you back those 6 months in a shelter, doesn't undo the trauma to your children, but I needed you to know that I understand now. I was wrong, completely, inexcusably wrong." Shanice let the silence sit. She'd imagined this moment during those shelter nights, Marcus apologizing, begging forgiveness, understanding what he'd done. Now that it was happening, she felt nothing, no satisfaction, no anger, just exhaustion. "I accept your apology, Marcus, not because it changes anything, but because holding on to anger hurts me more than you." Shanice stood. "But accepting your apology doesn't mean we're friends. Doesn't mean I'll give you special treatment or let you back into my buildings. You're just another person now. Not my landlord, not my tenant, just someone I once knew who made bad choices." "That's fair." Marcus stood too. "Can I ask, how did you do it? Go from homeless to owning multiple buildings in 12 years. "Hard work, education, refusing to give up, and learning the system that destroyed me so I could use it better." Shanice walked toward the door. "But mostly I had motivation you never had. I wasn't building wealth for ego. I was building safety for my children. That's a different kind of drive. What you've done here, Marcus gestured at the renovated building, it's better than anything I ever did. You're a better landlord than I was. I'm just a decent human being who happens to own property. It shouldn't be rare, but landlords like you made it rare. Shanice paused at the door. I hope your housing situation improves, Marcus. I genuinely do. Not because I forgive what you did, but because I don't believe anyone deserves to be homeless or housing insecure. Not even you. She left him standing in the lobby. A year later, Thompson Properties owned 12 buildings across Oakland. Shanice had created a non-profit, safe housing initiative that helped homeless families transition into stable housing through job training and placement. The nonprofit's first success story was a single mother with 3 children who'd been living in her car. Shanice got her into construction training, helped her find housing, mentored her through the process. You're giving back, a journalist observed during an interview. I'm paying forward, Shanice corrected. Someone helped me when I needed it. That caseworker Maria who told me about construction training. A program gave me skills. Employers gave me chances. I'm just continuing the chain. What about Marcus Brennan? Have you seen him since? No. I heard he moved out of state. I hope he's okay. I hope he learned. But honestly, I don't think about him much anymore. He's not the villain of my story. He's just the obstacle I overcame. Shanice's story became a case study in urban planning courses. Her testimony influenced housing policy in 3 California cities. Her nonprofit helped 200-plus families transition out of homelessness. And every year on November 15th, the anniversary of buying the building, she held an open house for the community. Free food, resources for tenants, celebration of stable housing. At the 2024 open house, Zoe, now graduated and working in affordable housing policy, gave a toast. 11 years ago, my mom, my brother, and I were evicted from this building. We ended up in a homeless shelter. I was 8 years old, scared, not understanding why we had to leave our home. Zoe's voice was strong. But my mom made a promise. She said we'd never be powerless again, and she kept that promise, not through revenge, but through transformation. She didn't just buy this building. She reimagined what it means to be a landlord. She created a model that proves you can be ethical and profitable. That housing can be a right, not just a commodity. Shanice watched her daughter speak, surrounded by tenants who'd become like family, in a building she'd transformed from neglect to hope. Marcus Brennan had taught her that power matters. But Shanice had learned something he never understood. Power is nothing without purpose. She'd been powerless once. Now she had power, and she used it every day to ensure other families wouldn't suffer what hers had suffered. That was the real victory. Not evicting Marcus, not owning the building. The victory was creating a system where the next single mother reporting mold wouldn't be evicted, where families had safe, affordable housing, where landlords could be profitable and ethical. Marcus had used power to destroy. Shanice used power to build. And that made all the difference.